Mario.
Super Mario 64 DS is essentially the same game you played back in 1996, though a few new twists and turns have been added. While the game still opens with Peach inviting Mario to her castle, and then subsequently getting kidnapped, you don't actually play as Mario right off the bat. Mario now shows up for the party with Wario and Luigi in tow, and the three of them enter the castle and promptly vanish. Yoshi, who's been sleeping on top of the castle, wakes up and sets off to find the missing characters. Eventually, you'll find Mario, Luigi, and Wario, and you'll be able to switch between them whenever you like. Luigi and Yoshi can jump a bit higher, Wario's punch can break bricks, and Mario is the only character that can triangle jump off of walls. Also, the game's flower power-up has a different effect on each of the 4 characters, and this sort of replaces the switch blocks from the original game. Since some stars require specific power-ups, you'll occasionally have to swap in another character to get the job done. By default, the game is configured to let you play without using the system's touchscreen. The D-pad's used for movement, and the buttons are used for jumping, ducking, attacking, and running. While you can also use the touchscreen for running here, the other 2 control modes are somewhat better suited for use with the touchscreen, shuffling the buttons around a bit to give you more control over your character. While the game's 3 options do a decent job of letting you control your character, none of them are quite as refined as the analog joystick that was used to control Mario back in the original game on the N64. The D-pad attempts to make up for the lack of refinement by being a little more momentum-based, but you'll still find yourself running off of ledges more often than you'd like. Using the touchscreen really isn't much better. The game's control issues aren't insurmountable, but it's kind of a bummer that the game doesn't control as well as the original. Mario 64 DS puts on a great show from a graphical standpoint. While the game's modeled after an 8-year-old N64 game, the character models have an increased poly count that makes them look much, much better. You'll still run across an ugly texture or 2, but the game runs at a great smooth frame rate and looks bright and colorful. The game's rough spots are also smoothed out a bit by the fact that you're playing it on a small, sharp screen instead of a television. The map on the lower screen is a little fuzzy in spots and isn't quite as easy to read as it should be, but it works. Super Mario 64 was an amazing game when it was originally released. For the most part, the game holds up pretty well, though there were a few head scratchers that may have players wondering how we ever got along back then. The camera in the game isn't so hot, and some of the game's stars are devilishly difficult to find. Fortunately, points of interest, like stars and some red coins, are highlighted on the map. The game also contains a handful of new areas to explore, though many of these smaller areas really aren't all that interesting. If you're near 3 other DS users, you can play a competitive 4-player mode. This mode only requires you to have 1 game card, taking advantage of the system's wireless game download feature to transmit the necessary data to the other systems. Unfortunately, the multiplayer is a pretty uneventful competition, and there are only a few different multiplayer levels to choose from. Also in the extras category are a series of stylus-oriented mini-games. You'll start out with only 8 games, but as you play through the adventure, you'll be able to find and catch rabbits, each of which gives up a key that unlocks another fun new minigame. Super Mario 64 DS retains the same music and speech samples used in the original game, though some new samples were added for the new characters, and a few effects have changed. The only downside is that some of the effects sound slightly tinny and are played back at a low bit rate, making them sound not quite as clear as they could have. On the upside, the game's stereo separation is very noticeable, and it does a good job of making you appreciate the system's stereo speakers. All things considered, Super Mario 64 DS is a great update of a classic game. While some portions of the